The little boy's voice cut through the bustling market like sunlight piercing fog. "Marry me?" he asked, his big emerald eyes sparkling with hope as he held out a slightly crushed daisy, petals trembling in his small fist. Tessa froze, her herb basket tipping, because she knew those eyes. She'd been trying to forget them for 7 years. What she didn't know was that his father, the Alpha King, stood in the shadows watching her every move. He'd been telling his son bedtime stories about her for years. That was his first mistake. The market in Eldridge Hollow pulsed with life that crisp autumn morning, the air thick with the scent of baked bread and spiced cider. Tessa wove through the throng of villagers, her cloak hood pulled low to shield her from prying eyes. At 28, she'd learned the hard way that anonymity was her greatest ally. She'd fled the capital's glittering dangers 6 years ago, carving out a simple existence as a healer in this remote valley, tending to fevers and broken bones. No one here knew her real name or the scar she carried, not the faint silver line across her collarbone from a childhood fall, but the deeper one etched into her soul. She paused at a stall piled high with wild mushrooms, her fingers brushing over the caps as memories flickered unbidden. Candlelight on dark hair, a king's low voice asking questions no one else ever had, the almost kiss under harvest moons. Shaking off the ghost, Tessa paid for her mushrooms and turned, only to nearly collide with a small boy. He stared up at her with striking emerald eyes, framed by wild auburn curls. Freckles dusted his nose like stars, and when he grinned, 2 tiny dimples appeared. "You're pretty," he declared, thrusting a daisy forward. "Marry me, please? I'll give you all my rocks. I have shiny ones." Tessa couldn't help the laugh that bubbled up, chasing away the shadows in her chest. She knelt to his level, accepting the flower with a flourish. "Well, aren't you charming? But marriage is a big promise. What's your name?" "Finian," he said proudly, puffing out his chest. "And I'm not little. I'm almost 6. Papa says I'm brave like a warrior." Her heart gave a strange, tender lurch at the name, an old one from the northern clans, but she pushed it aside. Children were her soft spot. In her healing work, she'd mended countless scraped knees and held tiny hands through fevers, always with the quiet ache that she'd never have one of her own. "Finian the Brave," she echoed, tucking the daisy behind her ear. "I'd be honored, but only if you promise to share your adventures with me someday, and maybe show me those shiny rocks." His face lit up like the sunrise. "I promise. I have a blue one that looks like Papa's eyes, and a red one that sparkles when you hold it to the light, and—" He stopped mid-sentence, his gaze darting past her shoulder with glee. Tessa followed his look, and her blood turned to ice. There, leaning against a nearby oak with arms crossed over a broad chest, stood a tall man whose presence commanded the air itself. His dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, and his jaw was shadowed with stubble that only sharpened the striking lines of his face. But it was his eyes, those piercing emerald depths, identical to the boy's, that locked onto hers, stripping away 7 years of careful walls in a single heartbeat. Tristan. Alpha King. Tristan. Here, in this forgotten hollow, watching her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. How did he find her? Why now? "Finian," Tristan called, his voice a deep rumble that sent shivers down her spine and warmth blooming in her chest. The boy scrambled to him immediately, small boots kicking up leaves, but Tristan's gaze never left Tessa's. "It seems you've made a new friend," he said to Finian, but the words were for her. Finian beamed up at his father, clutching Tessa's hem like he was afraid she'd vanish. "Papa, she said yes to my rocks, and she called me Finian, the Brave. She's the Moon Lady, I think." Tristan's mouth curved, just a flicker, but enough to soften the hard lines of his face. The Moon Lady, he repeated quietly, eyes still on Tessa. Tessa forced her voice steady. Your son has fine taste in rocks, she managed, dipping into a small curtsy that felt absurdly formal for a market square. I should be going. Patients are waiting. Tristan tilted his head, studying her the way he once had during those long nights, seeing past the cloak, past the healer facade, straight to the woman who'd once sat beside him while he bled and pretended it didn't hurt. Stay, he said simply. Join us for the midday meal at the Silver Oak Inn. Finian would be disappointed if his Moon Lady disappeared so quickly. Finian nodded vigorously, curls bouncing. Please? I want to show you my wolf carving. It's not finished, but it's going to be the biggest wolf ever. Tessa's resolve wavered. She could refuse. She should absolutely refuse. But Finian's hopeful expression, the way his small hand still clutched her cloak like a lifeline, tugged at something deep and unguarded. Tristan watched her internal war with quiet patience. One meal, he said softly. No obligations. Just gratitude for making my son smile like that. She looked from the boy to the man, Finian's dimples, Tristan's faint but growing smile. One meal, she agreed, the words tasting like surrender. Finian whooped and threw his arms around her waist in a sudden, fierce hug. Tessa's arms came around him, and for one heartbeat she let herself feel it, the warmth of a child's trust, the solid weight of a small body that fit perfectly against her. When she looked up, Tristan was watching them both with an unreadable expression. He offered his arm. Shall we? She hesitated only a second before slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. The contact was light, barely there, she was careful, but it sent a spark up her arm, familiar and terrifying all at once. As they walked toward the inn, Finian skipping between them and chattering about shiny rocks and brave warriors, Tessa felt the careful life she'd built begin to crack. And somewhere deep inside, a part of her that had been silent for years whispered, maybe it's time to stop running. The Silver Oak Inn stood at the edge of the market square, its weathered timbers and wide windows giving it the look of a place that had seen generations come and go. Tessa didn't notice the man who peeled away from the wall as they entered, didn't notice him slip into the alley beside the inn, or the small mirror flash he sent toward the eastern road. 3 short pulses, the signal for found her. Inside, Tristan led them to a corner table near the windows, far enough from the bar that conversation wouldn't carry. He pulled out a chair for Tessa with the same careful courtesy he'd once shown her in the healer's tent years ago, then lifted Finian onto the bench beside her so the boy could sit between them. Finian immediately scooted closer to Tessa, his small shoulder pressing against her arm as if he'd claimed her for the afternoon. I like sitting next to the Moon Lady, he announced, swinging his legs. She smells like flowers and pine. Tessa's cheeks warmed. That's just the herbs in my cloak, she said, smoothing a stray curl from his forehead without thinking. She caught herself and folded her hands in her lap. Tristan signaled the innkeeper for food. When the plates arrived, Finian attacked his bowl with the focus of a small warrior storming a castle, though he kept one eye on Tessa the whole time. Try the bread, he urged, tearing off a piece and holding it out to her like an offering. It's still warm. Papa says warm bread fixes almost everything. She accepted it, their fingers brushing. Tristan's gaze flicked to her hand, then back to her face. Almost everything, he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. Tessa kept her eyes on her stew, stirring it slowly. She could feel the weight of 7 years pressing against her ribs, the night she'd almost kissed him, the announcement that shattered the moment, the cold certainty that followed. She could never give him what the throne demanded. She'd known it since the healers in the capital had examined her after a brutal fever in her teens, their faces kind but final. Barren. The word had settled in her bones like frost. She'd left the next morning not just to spare him scandal, but to spare herself the slow death of watching him marry someone else, while she remained the healer who could fix everyone but herself. Finian's voice pulled her back. "Moon Lady? Do you know stories about wolves?" Tessa blinked, grateful for the distraction. "A few. What kind do you like?" "The ones where the wolves are brave and protect their pack," he said earnestly. "Papa tells me those. He says a good alpha always keeps his family safe, no matter what." Finian nodded at his own words, then paused mid-bite. His small brow furrowed for half a second, barely noticeable, before his eyes fluttered once, twice, then rolled back. His small body went limp in an instant, head lolling against Tristan's chest, arms slipping to his sides. The cider mug tipped, rolling across the table in slow motion, spilling in a dark arc. Tristan's arms snapped around him like iron. "Finian." He shifted the boy fully into his lap, cradling him against his chest, one hand cupping the back of his head. "Breathe, Finian. Come on. Breathe." Tessa was already moving, half out of her chair, reaching across the table. Her hand found Finian's wrist. The pulse was there, thready and racing, then stuttering. She pressed her other palm to his forehead, hot, clammy, the fever spiking in seconds. "Tristan," she said, low and urgent. "Lay him flat on the bench, head to the side." Tristan eased Finian down onto the cushioned bench beside him, his small body curled instinctively toward his father. Tessa knelt beside them, heedless of the few patrons who had gone still, watching. She tilted Finian's chin gently, checked his airway, then placed her hand over his heart, feeling the frantic, uneven beat slow, then steady again. Seconds stretched into eternity. Tristan's breathing was ragged, eyes locked on his son's face. "Please," he whispered, so soft only Tessa could hear. "Not yet." Finally, Finian's lashes fluttered. A small, confused whimper escaped him. His eyes opened, glassy, unfocused, then found Tristan's face. "Papa? I'm here." Tristan's voice cracked on the words. He gathered Finian back into his arms, rocking him gently, lips pressed to the crown of his head. Finian blinked slowly. Color crept back into his cheeks in uneven patches. He looked from Tristan to Tessa, then down at his own hands as though surprised they still worked. "I got funny tired again," he mumbled, sheepish now. "Papa says it's because I run too fast in my dreams." He tried to sit up straighter, small chin lifting with stubborn pride even as his eyelids drooped. "I promise I'm still brave, Moon Lady." Tessa's throat closed so tightly she could barely breathe. She reached out, cupping his small face in both hands. "You're the bravest," she whispered, voice trembling despite herself. "The very bravest." Finian's dimples flickered, faint and valiant. He leaned into her touch for a heartbeat, then turned his head just enough to look up at her through heavy lashes. "You fix people, right?" he asked, voice small. Tessa's heart squeezed. "I try, when they let me." Finian gave a tiny nod, then rested his cheek against Tristan's arm, small fingers curling into his father's shirt. "Maybe you can fix my funny tired, so I can run faster tomorrow." He managed one last wobbly smile, dimples flickering like dying candlelight, before tucking his face against Tristan's neck and dozing off. Small arms looped around his father's shoulders as though nothing had happened. Tristan held him tighter, eyes locked on Tessa over the top of Finian's sleeping head. "He's been like this for months," he said quietly, voice hoarse. "It started small. Dizzy spells after he'd been running, a stumble he laughed off. I told myself he was growing too fast, that his wolf was just restless. Then the fevers came. They slip in after dark, burn through him while he sleeps, and vanish by dawn. He sighed, the sound ragged at the edges. The healers in the capital call it a wasting malaise, something in the blood. They give tonics, rituals, prayers. Nothing lasts. It's getting worse by the day. Tessa studied Finian's face, the faint pallor beneath the flush, the way his lashes fluttered as though even in sleep he was fighting to stay present. "Have you noticed patterns?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "Anything that brings it on or makes it better?" Full moons are worse. The night before and after, he barely sleeps, and strong emotions, joy, fear, excitement, seem to drain him faster afterward. Tessa's breath caught. She met Tristan's gaze. "Is that why you came here to find me?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "I came because every other door has closed, and because when I heard the rumors, dark hair, quiet hands, eyes that see more than symptoms, I knew it was you." The admission hung between them, raw and unguarded. Tessa looked down at Finian again. The boy had curled tighter against his father, small hand fisted in Tristan's shirt, and something fierce and protective rose in her chest, something she hadn't let herself feel in years. "I'll look at him," she said at last. "Tomorrow, at my cottage. Bring him after the morning mist burns off. I'll need daylight, my full kit, and time." Tristan exhaled with visible relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." She reached across the table to brush a stray curl from Finian's forehead. The boy sighed in his sleep, leaning into the touch. "If it's what I think it might be, it won't be simple." Tristan's eyes never left her face. "Nothing worth having ever is." She stood slowly, gathering her cloak. "I'll see you tomorrow." She turned and walked out of the inn without another word, the daisy still tucked behind her ear, the taste of salt on her lips from a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. The next morning, Tessa rose before first light, stoking the fire in her small cottage until the room smelled of pine resin and dried lavender. She laid out her kit on the oak table, vials, a mortar, a thin silver knife for blood rites she hoped she wouldn't need. Every tool felt heavier than it should. She told herself it was just another patient, just another child with a fever. But the memory of Finian's limp body, yesterday, of Tristan's cracked voice whispering, "Not yet," made her hands shake as she arranged the herbs. When the knock came, soft but certain, her heart lurched. Tristan stood on the threshold, Finian cradled in his arms, looking infinitely fragile. The boy's auburn curls were damp from the mist, cheeks flushed, but his eyes were bright when they found Tessa. "Moon Lady," he said, voice hoarse but delighted. "Papa said we could come see you today. I brought my wolf carving. It's for you now." Tessa forced a smile, stepping aside. "Come in, both of you." Tristan ducked through the low doorway, careful not to jostle Finian. He looked older in the daylight, shadows under his eyes, a tightness around his mouth that hadn't been there yesterday. He settled Finian on the cushioned bench by the hearth, then straightened, gaze sweeping the cottage, the bundles of drying herbs, the worn books on bloodline curses, the single narrow bed in the corner. "It's warm," he said quietly. "Cozy, like you." Tessa's cheeks heated. She busied herself with a kettle, pouring chamomile into 3 mugs. "Sit, please." Finian patted the bench beside him. "Sit with me, Moon Lady. Papa can sit on the stool. He's big anyway." Tristan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. He took the stool, long legs stretched out, watching as Tessa knelt in front of Finian. "Let me see your hands, brave one." Finian held them out solemnly. Tessa turned them over, thumbs pressing gently against his wrists. The pulse was too fast, too shallow, even at rest. She moved to his neck, feeling the heat beneath his skin, then placed her palm over his heart. The beat stuttered, strong, then weak, strong, then weak, like a wolf pacing inside a cage too small. Finian watched her face nervously. "Do I feel funny inside?" "A little," she said honestly, "but we're going to figure it out." She glanced at Tristan. "I need to take a drop of blood. Just a prick. Will you hold him steady?" Tristan nodded once, shifting so Finian leaned back against his chest. The boy didn't flinch when the silver knife nicked his finger. Just a quick hiss, then a small bead of red welling up. Tessa caught it on a thin glass slide, mixed it with a drop of moonwort essence, and watched. The mixture clouded, then darkened to an ugly bruised purple before slowly clearing again. Tessa's stomach dropped. She knew that pattern. She'd seen it once, years ago, in forbidden texts smuggled out of the Capitol Library before she fled. A fading bond curse, rare, ancient, tied to royal bloodlines. It didn't just weaken the body, it frayed the connection between human and wolf, between life and the moon's pull. Left untreated, it consumed the child from the inside until there was nothing left to fight. And it was almost always fatal. She looked up at Tristan. His face had gone still, eyes searching hers. "What is it?" he asked, voice low. Tessa swallowed. "It's called a fading bond. It's an old, exceptionally rare curse, and it's progressing." Finian's small shoulders slumped, the proud puff of his chest deflating. "Does that mean I'm broken?" he asked, voice cracking on the last word. "No," she said fiercely, dropping to her knees so she was eye level with him. "No, sweet one. It means something bad is trying to hurt you. But we're going to stop it. I promise." Finian searched her face, lashes wet at the tips. His lower lip quivered once before he caught it between his teeth. Tristan's hand tightened on Finian's shoulder, knuckles white. "Can you stop it?" he asked Tessa, voice rough with everything he wasn't saying. Tessa kept her eyes on Finian while she answered. "There's a right. It requires sharing life force, mine to his. A blood bond, temporary at first, to stabilize the connection between his wolf and his body." Tristan's breath hitched. "Why yours?" "I can." "Because the curse is keyed to royal blood," she said quietly, finally looking up at him. "Your life force would only feed it, make it dig deeper. Mine." She hesitated. "Mine is outside the bloodline. It can act like a bridge, hold the fraying edges together long enough for his own strength to come back." Finian listened, head still tilted, small fingers tightening around hers. "So you'd give me some of your brave?" he asked. Tessa's throat closed. "Something like that." His eyes, those huge, trusting emerald eyes, filled slowly with the kind of understanding no child his age should have to carry. "Will it hurt you?" he whispered. Tessa swallowed hard. "Maybe a little, but I'm strong, and you're worth it." Finian's shoulders slumped another fraction. He looked down at their joined hands, at the way her fingers completely covered his. Then he lifted his gaze again, lashes dark and spiky with unshed tears. "I don't want you to get funny tired too," he said. "You're supposed to be the one who fixes it, not the one who breaks." "I won't break," Tessa assured him. "I promise. I'll just lend you some of my light until yours burns bright again." Finian nodded against his father's shirt, small, jerky movements. "Okay," he mumbled, "but if you get tired, you have to tell me, so I can be brave for you too." Tessa's eyes burned. She caught his hand, kissed the tiny prick on his finger. Deal. Then she rose slowly, knees aching from kneeling. The rite can't be done today, she said, meeting Tristan's gaze over Finian's head. It requires preparation, probably 3 full days. If we rush it, the bond could snap instead of mend. Tristan's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. 3 days. And in that time, we watch him closely. No more pushing through the spells. Rest, gentle play. No strong emotions if we can help it. The curse feeds on strain, physical or emotional. We keep him calm, keep him close. Finian's head lifted slightly. Does that mean you stay, with us, for 3 whole days? Tessa hesitated. Tristan's eyes lifted to hers, silent, pleading. Yes, she said softly, just until we get you healed. Finian's smile was small but radiant, dimples flickering back to life. Good, 'cause Papa can help you chop wood, and I need help with stories, and we both need Moon Lady hugs. Tristan let out a quiet, broken laugh, the first real one she'd heard from him, and pressed his lips to Finian's curls. You're right, brave one. We do. Tristan stayed in the village, claiming a room at the Silver Oak, but spending nearly every hour at Tessa's cottage. He chopped enough wood to last the winter, hauled water from the stream, repaired the sagging porch step without being asked. When Finian tired, Tessa brewed strengthening teas laced with star bloom and let the boy curl in her lap while she read stories from her worn book. One afternoon, Finian played quietly with his wolf carving, turning it over in his hands, when he paused and looked up. There was a man watching our window last night. When I woke up funny tired, he was just standing there. Tessa went still. What did he look like? Finian shrugged, already distracted by a knot in the wood. Tall. He had a bird on his shoulder. He held up the carving. Is my wolf's nose too big? Across the room, Tristan's axe paused mid-swing. He didn't turn around, but when he started again, the rhythm was slower, deliberate, like a man thinking hard about something he wasn't ready to say out loud. That evening, Finian whispered secrets against her collarbone. Papa smiles more when you're here, he confided, sleepy and soft. Like in my dreams, before the funny tired came. Tessa's arms tightened around him. He loves you very much. I know, Finian murmured, but he loves the Moon Lady, too. He just doesn't say it out loud. Their evenings grew heavier with unspoken things. Finian's spells came in quiet waves, moments where his eyes went distant, his small body sagged against whoever held him. Tessa watched, noted every pattern, every trigger. Tristan watched her watching, the space between them shrinking with every shared glance, every brush of fingers when passing a mug or a blanket. On the second night, after Finian had drifted off with his wolf carving clutched to his chest, Tessa and Tristan sat by the fire. Why does he call me the Moon Lady? Tristan exhaled, the sound raw at the edges. When the fevers started, I told him stories to keep the dark away. I told him about a woman who lived in the stars, a healer with gentle hands and eyes like storm clouds after rain. I said if he ever felt lost, she'd find him. I described you, every detail I could remember, the way your hair caught candlelight, the scar you hid under your shawl. I never said your name, but he never forgot her. He started calling her the Moon Lady, said she sang to him in his dreams when the fevers came, soft songs about running through forests that never ended. Tessa's throat tightened. You told him stories about me? Every time the fever took him and he woke up scared, I told him the Moon Lady would come someday, that she'd make everything good again. I told myself it was childish fancy, until he saw you in the market and his whole face lit up like he'd finally found her. A tear slipped down Tessa's cheek. I left because I knew I couldn't give you children. Tristan's head lifted. Tessa, I heard the healers, she continued, staring into the flames. After the fever that took my wolf's voice for months, they said the damage was permanent. No heirs, no legacy. And you had matches lined up. Good ones. Strong bloodlines. I thought if I disappeared quietly, you'd never have to choose between duty and pity. Tristan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I broke my engagement the day after you left. She stared at him. I couldn't stand at an altar and swear forever to someone else, he said, voice rough, when the only forever I wanted had already walked out without saying goodbye. The fire popped in the hearth between them. A log settled. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't tell anyone. He rubbed a hand over his face. After you, there was an arranged marriage. Finian came, and for a while I thought that was enough. But every full moon he'd ask about the Moon Lady, and I'd tell him the same story, and every time it felt like lying, because she wasn't a story. She was gone. Tessa's vision blurred. She looked at the sleeping boy, small chest rising and falling, wolf carvings still clutched tight. He thinks I'm her. He knows you are. Tristan's voice cracked. I've spent years telling my son bedtime stories about the woman I let walk away, and now she's here, holding him like he's hers. The silence that followed was filled only with the soft crackle of the fire and Finian's even breathing. Tessa rose slowly, legs unsteady, and crossed to the bench. She knelt beside Finian, smoothed a stray curl from his forehead with trembling fingers, and pressed the lightest kiss to his temple. He sighed in his sleep. Tristan stood behind her, close enough that she felt the heat of him at her back, the faint cedar and winter scent that had haunted her for years. He didn't touch her, but the space between them felt charged, alive with everything they hadn't said. When she finally rose and turned, Tristan was watching her with an expression that stole what little air remained in the room. Raw wonder, old grief, new hope. His eyes traced her face like he was memorizing her all over again. I should have fought for you then, he said quietly. I won't make the same mistake now. Tessa's heart stuttered. She took a half step closer before she could stop herself. The firelight carved shadows across his cheekbones, turned the green of his eyes to something molten and unguarded. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. He lifted a hand, slow, careful, and brushed the pad of his thumb along her cheekbone, catching the tear track she hadn't noticed. But I'm more scared of losing you both. His fingers lingered, warm against her skin. Tessa's breath caught. She leaned into the touch, just a fraction, enough to feel the way his pulse raced beneath her jaw. The space between them shrank to nothing. Tristan's gaze dropped to her mouth. His thumb traced the curve of her lower lip, soft, reverent, like he was asking permission without words. Tessa's eyes fluttered closed for a heartbeat. She felt the heat of him, the faint brush of his breath against her skin, the pull that had been there since the market, since the summit 7 years ago, since the first time he'd looked at her like she was more than a healer in a crowded hall. She rose on her toes. He leaned down. She met him halfway. Their lips touched, soft at first, tentative, tasting of salt and cedar and 7 years of quiet, aching want. Then deeper. His hand slid to the back of her neck, fingers threading into her hair, tilting her head as though he'd been dreaming of this exact angle for years. Tessa's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and he made a low sound against her mouth, like relief finally finding a home. The kiss turned heated, urgent. His other arm wrapped around her waist, drawing her flush against him until there was no space left between them. She arched into the contact, fingers sliding up to tangle in his hair, tugging just enough to earn another rough groan from deep in his chest. He kissed her like a man who had spent too long starving, slow, thorough one moment, desperate the next. She matched him, opening under his mouth, tasting the salt of her own tears and the faint bite of cider on his tongue. When they finally broke apart, Tessa's eyes fluttered open. His were dark, pupils blown wide, chest rising and falling hard. She swallowed. When I do the right, if it takes too much from me, Finian needs you whole. He needs his father, not a man who's grieving another loss, not a man who's distracted because, her voice cracked, because I let myself become more than the moon lady in his stories. Tristan's thumb brushed the pulse at the base of her throat, slow, steady circles. You think loving you would make me less for him? He asked quietly. I think loving me could break you if I don't come back from the right the same way I went in. She pressed her forehead harder against his, eyes stinging. And I won't do that to him. Tristan's arms came around her, strong and steady. Then we do it together, all three of us. Outside, the mist thickened, hiding the path to the capital. Somewhere in those distant halls, a woman with ice in her veins waited, still believing the fading bond would quietly remove the last obstacle to her claim on the throne. The mist hung heavy over Eldridge Hollow that third night, wrapping the village in a shroud that muffled even the owl calls from the surrounding woods. Inside the cottage, Tessa moved with quiet purpose, drawing the binding circle on the packed earth floor. Silver root dust glittered in the firelight as she traced the runes, her hands steady despite the ache in her chest. Finian slept fitfully on the narrow bed, his small body twitching under the blanket, as if his wolf sensed the storm brewing. Tristan stood by the window, arms crossed, staring into the fog. His posture was tense, every line of him coiled like a predator. We start the rite at dawn, he said without turning, when the first light hits the circle. Tessa nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. It'll take everything I have. If it works, it will. His voice was steel, but when he looked at her, the emerald depths softened. You're stronger than you know. She crossed to him, slipping her hand into his. For a moment they stood like that, fingers intertwined, the world narrowed to the warmth between them and the sleeping child behind. The kiss from last night lingered in the air like a promise unfulfilled, a heat that had ignited and now waited. But the night had other plans. Far from the hollow, in the opulent halls of the Capitol Palace, Lady Selene paced her chambers like a caged panther. Her dark hair was pinned in an intricate braid, her gown a cascade of midnight silk that whispered against the stone floors. At 35, she was still a beauty. Sharp features, eyes like polished obsidian, but time and ambition had etched fine lines of calculation around them. She had been Tristan's betrothed once, the perfect match. Highborn, politically connected, ruthless enough to secure a throne. But he had rejected her, humiliated her, breaking the engagement without explanation. A matter of the heart, the council had whispered, as if hearts had any place in ruling. Selene had smiled through the insult, played the loyal advisor, even as she plotted. The curse on the royal bloodline had been her masterstroke, a subtle fading bond, engineered by a mage she controlled, designed to weaken any heir not of her choosing. It had killed Elowen slowly, after the birth, leaving Tristan isolated, grieving, vulnerable to her influence. She had waited patiently for the curse to claim Finian too, clearing the path for her to console the king, remarry him, bear his heirs and rule through them. But now, reports from her spies in the hollow shattered that plan, A healer woman had allegedly drawn the king there. The boy was improving. Whispers of a right, of bonds being mended. Celine's fist clenched around the raven's message scroll. "The low-born wench," she hissed to the empty room. Tessa. The name had surfaced in old records from the summit 7 years ago. A packless healer who had tended Tristan's wounds and vanished like smoke. Celine had dismissed her as irrelevant then. Now she saw the truth. Tessa was the ghost responsible for Tristan's rejection of her. She couldn't let it stand. If the curse was broken, if Tristan found strength in this woman, her hold on the throne would slip forever. "Summon the shadows," she commanded the guard at her door. Her elite assassins, shifters loyal only to her coin, would strike tonight, eliminate the healer, claim the boy as a rescued heir under her protection. Tristan would be broken, pliable. Celine smiled into the mirror, eyes cold as winter. Empires weren't built on hearts, they were built on broken ones. Back in the cottage, the attack came without warning. A low growl from the woods was the only omen before the door exploded inward in a shower of splinters. 6 wolves surged through, massive shadows with glowing red eyes, foam dripping from their jaws, collars pulsing with dark enchantment. Tristan shifted in a blur, bones cracking and reforming with a wet snap. His human form ripped away to reveal a massive golden wolf, hackles raised like golden spikes, teeth bared in a snarl that vibrated through the floorboards. He met the first attacker mid-leap, jaws clamping down on its throat with a savage crunch. Hot blood sprayed across his muzzle, the taste coppery and foul, as the beast's body went limp and thudded to the ground. Tessa scooped Finian from the bed, her heart slamming against her ribs. The boy woke with a terrified wail, small limbs flailing. "Moon Lady! Stay with me," she gasped, lungs burning as she dragged him into the half-finished binding circle. The rite wasn't ready. The herbs needed one more dawn to steep, but there was no choice. The runes glowed faintly under her feet, incomplete and unstable. Another wolf lunged past Tristan, claws gouging deep furrows in the wooden floor as it barreled toward her. Tessa thrust her silver knife out, the blade sinking into its flank with a sickening tear. The beast howled, a piercing guttural sound that rattled her teeth, staggering back. But 2 more circled, low growls rumbling like distant thunder, their red eyes fixed on Finian. Finian clung to her leg, small body shaking violently, but his emerald eyes, already glazing with the onset of fever, flashed with fierce determination. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his skin hot to the touch, but he pushed forward a step, tiny hands balled into fists. "Bad wolves. Leave Moon Lady alone." His voice trembled with terror in every syllable, but he planted himself between Tessa and the nearest attacker, as if his tiny frame could shield her. Tessa's throat closed. "Finian, no!" Tristan roared, a sound that shook the rafters, slamming one attacker into the wall with bone-shattering force. Blood slicked the floor now, but he was outnumbered. Claws raked his flank, tearing through fur and muscle with burning agony. He twisted, biting deep into another attacker's shoulder, but his own wounds piled up, a gash across his haunch, a fang puncturing his shoulder, venom seeping in like liquid fire. Tessa dropped to her knees in the circle, pulling Finian into her lap. "Hold my hand, Finian. Don't let go." He gripped her fingers, tears streaming down his flushed face, his body now trembling not just from fear, but from the fever spiking hard, his skin scorching, breaths coming in short gasps. "Don't be scared, Moon Lady," he whispered through chattering teeth, even as his eyes fluttered, the glassy sheen deepening. "Papa and I will keep you safe. I promise." He tried to stand again, small legs wobbling, one hand reaching for the silver knife on the ground as if to defend her himself. Her heart shattered, She sliced her palm, deep, the pain a sharp sting, and then his, mixing their blood on the glass slide. The moonwort essence bubbled unnaturally, frothing like poison, the curse fighting back with a surge of dark energy that made the air hum and the runes flicker erratically. Outside, more howls pierced the night. Celine's forces closing in, an army of shadowed figures circling the cottage, their collars pulsing in unison. Tristan fought like a storm unleashed, a golden blur of fury and desperation. He took down another wolf, jaws crushing its skull with a gruesome pop, but the venom was spreading, his vision blurring, limbs heavy, form flickering between wolf and man as the poison sapped his strength. A third wolf barreled into him, claws digging into his side, ripping muscle with a wet tear that sent agony lancing through his body. He staggered, his roar weakening to a pained growl. The remaining wolves sensed victory. One broke through, leaping toward the circle. Tessa shoved Finian behind her, knife raised, but her arm shook, the right already pulling from her, draining her strength. The wolf's jaws snapped inches from her throat, hot breath reeking of rot. Finian screamed and threw himself at her side, small arms wrapping around her waist, protective even as his fever made him sway, his body limp and burning against hers. Tristan lunged, human now, dagger pulled from his boot. He drove it into the wolf's eye with a sickening squelch, the beast convulsing as it died. But the effort cost him. He collapsed to one knee, gasping, blood pooling beneath him. "Tessa, finish it," she chanted the right, voice rising over the chaos, power surging through her, hot, draining. Finian gasped as the bond snapped into place, his small body arching against hers. Color flooded his cheeks, his eyes cleared, the glassy sheen vanishing, the fever breaking in a rush that left him panting but strong. But now the curse lashed back. Searing pain ripped through Tessa's veins like fire in her blood. She screamed, vision blurring to black spots, strength slipping like sand through her fingers. The circle flickered, dangerously, runes dimming as her life force poured out too fast, too much. The last two wolves closed in, jaws wide, Tristan too wounded to stop them. Finian squeezed her hand tighter, his voice a desperate whisper through tears. "Moon Lady, hold on." Tristan crawled to them, bloodied and barely upright, and pressed his hand over hers in the circle. Something tore open in her chest, like a door blown off its hinges by a wind she'd kept out for 7 years. She felt him. Actually felt him. His exhaustion, his terror, his love for the boy between them, and underneath all of it, steady as a heartbeat. Her. He had kept a place for her. All this time. The mate bond ignited. Golden light surged through the circle, weaving into the right, flooding the places where her strength had guttered out. Tessa gasped and drew on it, drew on him, pulling the connection, and drove it straight into the heart of the curse. The curse shattered with a deafening crack, like glass under a hammer. Dark energy exploded outward, slamming into the wolves, their collars splintering, red eyes fading as Celine's hold snapped. The beasts convulsed, howls turning to whimpers, before fleeing into the mist, broken and free. Tessa slumped forward, the world fading to gray. Finian clung to her, small voice piercing the haze. "Moon Lady, wake up, please." Tristan pulled her into his arms, the mate bond humming between them, warm, healing, pulling her back from the brink. "Tessa, stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open. Finian gripped her hand, color fully returned to his face, his wolf stirring strong and true for the first time. "You did it," he whispered, tears mixing with a dimpled smile. "You fixed me." But the victory was hard won. Tristan's wounds were deep, venom still burning, and Tessa's strength was a fragile thread. They had won the night, but the shadows of the capital loomed. In the opulent halls of the capital palace, Lady Celine paced her chambers, The Raven's message crumpled in her fist. Her spies had failed. The attack repelled, the curse broken. She had underestimated the low-born woman. Guards pounded on her door. Tristan's loyalists, alerted by the mage's betrayal under torture. Celine's eyes narrowed. She would not go quietly. She slipped a dagger into her sleeve and whispered the final incantation she had kept hidden. A blood curse keyed to her own life force, designed to strike one last blow if all else failed. If she fell, she would take the healer with her, poison the mate bond from afar, and leave Tristan broken once more. The trial in the Grand Hall was a storm of reckoning. Celine stood in chains before the council, her midnight silk gown torn at the hem, obsidian eyes blazing defiance. "This is madness," she spat, voice ringing off the stone arches. "The king is bewitched by a low-born witch who dares accuse me of crimes she cannot prove." Tristan, wounds bandaged but standing tall beside Tessa, presented the evidence with cold precision. The captured mage's confession under truth serum, ledgers tracing payments from Celine's coffers, the shattered collars bearing her personal seal. She orchestrated the fading bond curse, not just on Finian, but on Eloan before him, to weaken me, to manipulate the throne after I rejected her. The council recoiled, murmurs rippling through the hall. Celine's mind raced. The burning humiliation of Tristan's rejection, the years of scheming to isolate him, the curse as her vengeance and path to power. She lifted her chin, lips curling into a venomous smile. "You were weak," she snarled, voice carrying to every corner. "I would have made you strong, given you heirs, secured your legacy. Instead, you chase ghosts and barren healers." Her gaze locked on Tessa. "A woman who can never give you children. A barren nothing who will leave your line empty. You traded a queen like me for a grave." The hall fell silent. Finian, his small hand tight in Tessa's, stiffened. His emerald eyes, clear now, no trace of fever, narrowed. He stepped forward. "You're wrong," he said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "Mamas don't have to make babies to be mamas. They just have to love you. And Moon Lady loves me. She saved me. You tried to hurt me. That's why you're the nothing." The words landed like a slap. Celine's smile faltered, color draining from her face. Tessa's throat closed. She squeezed Finian's hand, tears burning behind her eyes, but Finian didn't look away from Celine. His small shoulders were squared, chin high, the same brave stance he had taken when the wolves attacked. Celine recovered, lips twisting. Charming sentiment from a child who doesn't understand what he's lost. She turned to Tristan. "You will regret this. All of you." Tristan stepped forward, voice cold as winter steel. "No, you will." Celine lunged, the hidden dagger flashing from her sleeve in a blur of silver. The hall erupted, guards shouting, but Tristan was faster. He caught her wrist mid-strike, twisting with brutal efficiency. The dagger clattered to the stone floor. Before she could speak, he drove his knee into her midsection, forcing the air from her lungs in a sharp gasp. "For Eloan," he said, voice low and lethal. "For Finian, and for every life you poisoned." Guards swarmed, pinning her arms. Celine's eyes blazed with final, impotent rage. She spat blood onto the floor. "You think this ends me? The curse—" She whispered the last syllable of her blood curse, the incantation she had prepared in her chambers. But nothing happened. The mate bond, burning between Tristan and Tessa, flared once, a golden pulse that shattered the lingering enchantment like glass under a hammer. Celine staggered, eyes widening in disbelief as the spell she had tied to her own life force unraveled, backlashing into her veins. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, clutching her throat. The council rose as one. The sentence was unanimous. execution for treason, high sorcery, and attempted regicide. As the blade fell, Celine's last thought was bitter defeat. She had broken him once, but not enough. Tristan lifted Finian into his arms. The boy wrapped his arms around his father's neck, then reached out to Tessa. She took his hand, and the three of them walked out together, past bowing council members, past stunned nobles, past the weight of 7 years finally lifting. Later that evening, in the private solar overlooking the gardens, Tristan sat Finian on his knee. The boy was still flushed with excitement, eyes wide from the events of the day. "Papa," Finian whispered, "Moon Lady isn't my first mama, right? My first mama is in the stars now, but Moon Lady, she's here. She holds me when I'm funny tired. She kisses my forehead like in the stories." His voice wobbled just a little. "Can she be my real mama now?" Tristan's mouth twitched. "Maybe. But first..." He glanced at Tessa, who stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. "We need to ask her properly." Finian's eyes lit up. "Like in the stories, with a knee and a pretty ring?" "Exactly like in the stories, but we have to make it special. She deserves special." Finian nodded vigorously. "We can do it in the garden. It's pretty just like her. And I can help. I can give her my best shiny rock as a promise ring." Tristan laughed. "That's perfect, Finian." 2 nights later, under moonlight in the summit garden where they had almost kissed 7 years ago, Tristan led Tessa down a jasmine-lined path. Finian walked between them, clutching a small velvet pouch, practically vibrating with excitement. The air was sweet with night-blooming flowers. Tristan stopped beneath the old willow, its branches trailing like silver curtains in the moonlight. "Tessa," he said, voice thick with emotion. She turned to him, heart racing. He dropped to one knee. Finian bounced forward, holding out the pouch with both hands. "Moon Lady, this is for you. It's my best shiny rock. Papa says it's a promise rock." Tessa's eyes filled as she took the pouch. Inside was a smooth blue stone, polished to a gleam, the one Finian had first promised her in the market. Tristan took her hands. "Marry me, Tessa? Not for duty or fate, but because every day since you left, I've wished for one more chance to choose you, and I choose you now, forever." Finian tugged her sleeve. "Say yes, Moon Lady. Then we can be a real family, and I can call you Mama all the time, not just in my head." Tessa's tears fell freely. She knelt too, pulling Finian into a hug, then looked at Tristan over the boy's head. "Yes," she whispered. Finian whooped, throwing his arms around both of them. "We're gonna have the biggest party ever, with cakes and wolves and shiny rocks." Tristan laughed, full, warm, the sound echoing through the garden. He pulled Tessa close, kissing her softly under the moonlight, Finian giggling between them. Months later, the moon hung low over the palace gardens, silver light spilling across the rose hedges. Finian, now 6.5, healthy and strong, no trace of fever left in his bright eyes, ran ahead, giggling as he tried to outrun his own shadow. Every evening he practiced, sprinting the length of the lawn, arms pumping, curls bouncing, determined to get faster, stronger, better. "So Mama can see how brave I am," he'd shout over his shoulder, voice full of pride. "She fixed me, so I have to be the fastest wolf ever." Tessa leaned against the stone railing. Tristan stood close behind her, his chest warm against her back, arms bracketing hers on the railing. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "He's happy," he murmured. "Look at him go." She smiled, watching Finian spin in a circle, arms wide, trying to coax a firefly to land on his nose now. He's always happy when the nights are warm. Just then, a soft murmur of voices drifted up from the garden path below. 2 courtiers walking, arm in arm, their silk gowns catching the moonlight. They hadn't noticed the king and queen above. "One child," one of them said in a low, pitying tone. "Beautiful boy, but the succession is so fragile now. No spares, no daughters to bind alliances. And the queen, well, everyone knows she's barren. A tragedy for the line. The king should have taken a second wife." The other made a sympathetic sound. "She's kind to the prince, I'll give her that. But kindness doesn't fill cradles. The council whispers about it constantly." Tessa stiffened. The ache in her body sharpened, familiar and raw. Tristan's arms tightened around her. "They're wrong," he said quietly against her ear. "They've always been wrong." Before she could answer, Finian spotted them on the balcony. His face lit up. "Mama, Papa, watch. I'm faster than yesterday." He took off again, legs pumping, cheeks flushed with effort. He ran the full length of the lawn twice more, then spun back toward the balcony steps, panting and grinning. When he reached them, he skidded to a stop, hands on his knees, breathing hard. "Did you see? I almost caught a firefly in midair. I'm getting so fast." Tessa knelt, brushing damp curls from his forehead. "I saw. You're incredible, Finian." Finian beamed, then noticed her expression, the faint tightness around her eyes. His brow furrowed. He looked from her to Tristan, then back again. "Mama, are you sad?" She shook her head, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." He studied her a moment longer, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of parchment, creased and slightly crumpled from being carried all day. "I made this for you," he said shyly. "After I heard some people talking in the hall yesterday. They said mean things about no more babies. I didn't like it." Tessa unfolded the drawing with trembling fingers. It was simple, childlike lines in bright crayon. 3 figures, standing together under a big moon, a tall man with dark hair and a crown, a woman with long hair and a gentle smile, a small boy between them, holding both their hands. Above them, fireflies danced in yellow dots. Below, in careful, wobbly letters, "Our family. Mama plus Papa plus me. That's all we need." Finian pointed to each figure. "See? We're holding hands. And there's no empty space. We're complete. No more babies needed, just us." Tessa's tears fell freely now. She pulled him into her arms, hugging him so tightly he squeaked. "You're right," she whispered against his curls. "We're complete. I love you so much, brave one." Finian hugged her back, then peeked up at Tristan. "Papa? Tell her too." Tristan crouched beside them, resting one hand on Finian's back and the other on Tessa's cheek, thumb brushing away her tears. "I've spent 7 years believing I had to fill every empty space," he said quietly. "A throne, a line, a legacy. But you and Finian showed me the truth. Family isn't measured by numbers. It's measured by love, by the way you hold him when he's scared, by the way he runs to make you proud, by the way you stayed, through curses, through wolves, through everything, and chose us anyway." He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. "You are my mate, my queen, his mother, and you are more than enough. I love you, Tessa, not because of what you can give the throne, but because of who you are to us." Finian giggled between them. "Papa's crying too." Tristan laughed and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I am. Happy tears, Finian." As Finian threw his arms around both their necks, the ache in Tessa's body eased. Finian's drawing crinkled between them, a small, colorful promise. Under the full moon, they stood together, king, queen, and their son, watching fireflies dance like stars come down to earth. And in that moment, the old wound finally closed. Not because it had never existed, but because love, fierce, small, stubborn, and brave, had grown over it like ivy over stone, until all that remained was the shape of something beautiful. Can you rate this story from 1 to 10? I love hearing your feedback, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It helps more people find this story.